Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, November the 23rd, 2022, pre-Turkey Day, and welcome to How the Frack We Got Here. On How the Frack We Got Here, we are a podcast that basically is about the news, only to inform you to make up your own mind about yourself. Try out something new, see if it works out. I host the most Will Buchanan. Of course, we are a news podcast, guys, so we do try to watch our language, as well as there may be things that might be shown that might be a little too graphic for viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we get into this? We get into this mainly because, well, I don't know if Biden is dark Biden or Biden is playing chess with checkers, but when it comes to this little fact of the matter, guys, that about the student loans, a lot of you guys may have actually gotten approval emails or letters of approval in the mail saying that, yes, you have been approved for the plan. But unfortunately, the powers that be have decided, most of the Republicans, have said, hold on, we don't like this.
They blocked the Biden administration from implementing this student loan forgiveness plan that had been approved for about 16 million Americans who are going to see as much as $10,000 or $20,000 in student debt relief, depending on their circumstances. Now, today, we've learned that President Biden has decided to extend the repayment moratorium, that freeze on all student loan payments for all federal student loan debt holders while those court challenges continue to play out. That moratorium was set to expire at the end of this year. Here's the president explaining his decision.
We're not going to back down, though, in our fight to give families breathing room. That's why the Department of Justice is asking the Supreme Court of the United States to rule on the case. But it isn't fair to ask tens of millions of borrowers eligible for relief to resume their student debt payments while the courts consider the lawsuit. For that reason, the Secretary of Education is extending the pause on student loan payments while we seek relief from the courts, but no later than June 30, 2023.
That he is, quote, completely confident that this student debt relief forgiveness program is completely legal. And he, as you said, as you heard there, the president saying that he's going to continue to fight this tooth and nail. But there are at least some answers for those facing uncertainty heading into this holiday season about whether or not they were going to have to resume those repayments. Bianna, Victor?
So, needless to say, guys, yes, the unfortunate wheel is going to keep turning because mostly conservatives, I find it very hard that I've seen those who are not conservative turn around there and say, because it's usually conservative mind thinking, well, I paid off my loan, shouldn't I get my money back? Not realizing that everybody's financial and job incomes are not always equal. In fact, there are big disparities among various diversity of groups. But try telling that to those that have that mindset of, well, y'all took out the loan, you should never took it. Not understanding the fact that college education seems to get further and further away because the cost of tuition goes up these colleges and universities every year, but the education is still the same. But, you know, that's apparently a whole other conversation that conservatives don't want to have. But anyway, the reason why I bring this up is because Biden did say, and of course this is one of his campaign promises, that he was looking into relieving student loan debt for multiple borrowers. Now it's been scaled down to eligible borrowers because conservatives are trying to find every and any way to make sure that this doesn't happen. And that's just the truth. They are trying to find every way humanly possible for this not to happen. Considering the fact right now there are 6 lawsuits in 6 different states, an appeals judge in Texas did rule that it was unconstitutional. How dare the president be able to forgive student loan debt as if it's going to add to the already mountain range of debt, one would say, that the country already has. But they don't seem to think that way when we were going through 2 wars. But that being said, Biden, again, like I said, I don't know if Biden's playing chess or checkers, because technically the Democrats, if I was them, would turn around to there and say, we're trying to help you guys alleviate your debt, because they understand that student loan debt is a lifelong commitment. Yes, some people have been able to pay their way out. Good for them. Others are usually stuck with it all their lives, because student loan debts appear on credit reports. And trust me, that debt to income ratio is a mother, because again, student loans can keep people from buying homes, owning cars, getting jobs, because yes, jobs check your credit too. Can prevent you from getting the lifestyle that you want to have, because you went to college in the first place to get the lifestyle that you wanted to have. So there goes the endless circle. But Biden did keep his promise of saying, well, 10,000 to 20,000, that's the number he's stuck on. Even though I have said many times on this podcast that I wish he would have went further. I mean, from a progressive standpoint, he should have went way further. Considering the fact that we spent trillions of dollars on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, we can't take $1.7 trillion and forget the entire student loan debt. Because I've been saying this before, if you remove debt from those consumers will spend money back into the economy will basically pull itself out of this late recession, because that's what it's been doing every time a Republican administration decides to give money to the top earners and take away from the bottom, and then 2 Democratic presidents have to spend their terms cleaning up the mess that one Republican administration done in 4 years. This is not the first time in American history this has happened. So Biden and Democrats, Biden's going to kick the can down the road again and sit there and say, hey, well, if this is going to be tied up in courts, then they should make student loan payments. Because trust me, conservatives are not fighting for anybody but the private loan, the private banks who give out these student loans. They're fighting for them. Because I cannot make this up. In one of the lawsuits that is against the student debt relief program, it clearly says the reason why they are fighting for the banks is because those private banks cannot collect on interest loans. Think about that for a second. They can't collect on the interest if that actual plan goes through. Do you know how greedy that sounds? That a bank can't get more blood from a stone than what's already getting if said person gets relief. That is beyond messed up. But even more so, the banks are bankrolling the conservatives, the GOP, and the GOP is the only ones fighting hard for it. But you never notice the GOP don't have any plans themselves. They don't. For student loan debt, they don't. For student loan debt, they believe well, if you took out the loan, you should pay for it. That's it. Think about that for a second. This is conservatives. Oh, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. When every conservative was given money or was given money as an inheritance. There's no such thing as self-made. Eventually, you did get some help along the way, whether it was through family, whether it was through relationships, whether it was through networking. Either way, nobody's self-made. But conservatives believe in this blue-collar, pull yourself by the bootstraps, make your own way and all this stuff, not realizing that college education seems to be less and less of an alternative, because a lot of these kids, especially who are coming out of high school, are starting to realize it's not worth it. A lot of these kids who they want so bad to go to college are like, wait a second, I don't need a degree to do this, or I don't need certifications to do this, or I don't need X, Y, and Z to get to where I'm going to. Because a lot of companies, because the world is changing. I mean, even now there's a technical job recession. If you work in the IT industry like myself, you'll notice that a lot of jobs are being put to the wayside. Some of them through automation, some of them because they just simply don't want to pay workers and would rather go for overseas assistance. That being said, these kids are realizing I'm not about to tie myself to a 20 or 30 or 40 or higher up $1,000 loan and then spend the next 20 to 30 years of my life trying to pay it off and realizing I'm nowhere fast. A lot of these kids are waking up, but I always sit there and say it the same. It is amazing that nobody is looking at these college universities and asking every year, why does tuition go up, but the college education is the same? Nobody is asking that question. And that to me is the most alarming thing about this. But again, student debt loan, whatever relief you get from student loan debt, whether it's 10,000 or 20,000, cool. It's breathing room. Should it be more? Absolutely. Do I think that Biden needs to take this opportunity and push forward and say, you know what? If you weren't happy with 10 or 20,000, you're going to be pissed when I go for the whole bag. Be pissed, because I hate to break it to you, as we now pass the midterms, with the Democrats still holding the Senate and still having the presidency for 2 years, and the Republicans have the House, I have already sat there and said on the previous podcast what the now GOP-controlled House wants to do. They want to run BS investigations instead of actually pushing forth bills to help the American economy. They want to investigate Hunter Biden. They want to investigate the DOJ. They want to investigate the FBI over their handling of Trump. That is the GOP's agenda come January. So if I was the Democrats, for the majority now, for the end of November till December, whatever you're trying to get out the way, you might want to expedite it. That's all I'm saying. But speaking of things finally getting expedited, I believe that Trump had reached out to the Supreme Court to keep the current 117 Congress, specifically the Ways and Means Committee, from getting his taxes. And the Supreme Court said, nah.
Big loss for former President Donald Trump at the hands of the Supreme Court today. He had tried to get the Supreme Court to intervene to block his tax records from going to the Democratic-led House Ways and Means Committee. Former President Trump had lost in lower courts. He had gone up to the Supreme Court saying, of all the requests for documents that had been going on during his presidency and since, this was the worst request, he said in his filing, because it involved his personal tax returns. The Supreme Court today, in just a 2-sentence order, said, no, it's denied. There were no recorded dissents, including from any of the Trump-appointed justices or any of the other conservatives on this very conservative court, unanimously, at least on paper, against President Trump. Again, there might have been some dissents behind the scenes, but none of them were made public. So a major loss for former President Trump and a major victory for the Democratic-led House Ways and Means Committee.
So what does that mean? That basically means that, you went to the highest court in the land, you took a swing, you missed. Which means that now there is nothing keeping the Ways and Means Committee from getting a hold of Trump's taxes. There will not be another appeal. There will not be anything else unless somehow Trump's lawyers figure out some way, some form, and trust me, they're probably burning the midnight oil trying to figure that out. Because if everything goes well, because the Supreme Court did not take on the case, that means that the original ruling does stand, and that the Ways and Means Committee could get Trump's tax returns sometime next week if being on the hopeful side. But like I said, that's only if Trump's legal team doesn't find some rhyme or reason or things of that nature to turn around and sit there and say, well, no, this needs to happen. We can't let this happen, which I've always said it best. It's almost like when it comes to the former failure in chief, it's almost like a mob movie. Right now, we're at Godfather Part 3, where Michael Corleone is reflecting on his life choices and where it's gotten him. And you can literally see the end coming, because as much as gangster and mob movies are celebrated, there are no happy endings. And do I think that Trump will find his happy ending in an orange jumpsuit? Maybe. Considering the fact he's already fighting many lawsuits on many fronts, the fraud investigation of his real estate holdings with the Manhattan Attorney General there, he's still fighting the FBI over documents that he had in his possession that he no longer should have because he's no longer president, which means that he no longer had security clearance of the highest level to view said documents that they took from the White House to Mar-a-Lago. He is still fighting literally multiple lawsuits, business lawsuits, a sexual harassment suit, and on top of that, he has sat there and said that he wants to run for president again in 2024 with a GOP party that seems divided. I mean, definitely does seem divided. But the point I'm making is Trump has been so protected with tax returns. Well, you have to go through audits. You have to do this. He stalled. Now he can't stall anymore. So my thing is, I really do wonder now. I'm like, it's just like when Robert Mueller was investigating Trump, and I think to this day that Robert Mueller knew Trump was guilty as shit. I really think that. But because he's an impartial investigator, he sat there and said so many words. Yeah, he knew. Which again tells me a lot that once we do get to the fact of, well, once we do get those tax returns, what happens then? The Ways and Means Committee could pass that along to basically every other official now that they have tax returns that can actually view them, which could spell disaster for Trump, especially if the media gets a hold of it. Because we've already seen what happens, because the New York Times did get a hold of Trump's tax returns from like 20 years ago, where he wrote off $1 billion in losses on his taxes and didn't have to pay on it. So yeah, it's got to be interesting times in the Ways and Means Committee to get a hold of Trump's tax returns. But again, moving gears for a second, because I cannot believe we're still talking about this. Midterms have passed. However, Georgia's Senate race between Herschel Walker and I can't believe I'm still saying this. Between Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock, they are having a runoff because by Georgia's special election, you have to win by 50,000 votes. Neither candidate was able to do that. So they're having a runoff election come December 6th. However, Herschel Walker, the man, I cannot believe I'm saying this. Herschel Walker, the man who lied and saying he graduated from University of Georgia, top of his class. He lied. He said he was a law enforcement officer. He lied. He said he ran a business. He lied. He believed in family values, didn't believe in abortion. Yet 3 women have came forward and said that they had abortions by this man. They paid for it and gave them a get well soon card. And now, when you thought the whole vampire werewolf conversation, yes, it's out there. I didn't want to bring it. I didn't want to play that one because the fact that at a political rally, he brought up the fact about vampires and werewolves amazes me. But it seems that Herschel Walker is a part of the Hold My Beer community because he's now in a paid commercial to boycott transgenders in sports. I swear, if I could make this up, I would be a multi-millionaire novelist by now.
That mass shooting Saturday night in Colorado Springs at an LGBTQ nightclub, 5 people killed. Herschel Walker in Georgia has released a new ad today. Let's play a portion of it.
I'm Riley Gaines, a 12-time NCAA All-American.
And I'm Herschel Walker.
For more than a decade, I worked so hard, 4 a.m. practices to be the best. But my senior year, I was forced to compete against a biological male.
That's unfair and wrong.
A man won the swimming title that belonged to a woman, and Senator Warnock voted to let it happen.
Warnock's afraid to stand up for female athletes.
Herschel Walker stands up for what's right.
Why is that the message for this moment?
Well, it's a huge issue for Republican base. I assume what the Walker campaign is thinking is that they need to keep Republicans engaged in this election. Obviously, they got to get them to come out to the polls one more time. And there were a number of Republicans who voted for Kemp in the general election who didn't vote for Herschel Walker. So this is a base engagement strategy. And just having been around Republican politics for a few years, I can tell you this issue right here does engage Republicans. So I see why they're doing it. I understand the strategy behind it. But to me, it is all about keeping Republicans on the hook to come out one more time in an election where Walker is actually fighting from behind. He got fewer votes, so he's got to get a few more Republicans to the polls on the runoff.
Just question the timing of it all, though. He's got a few more weeks in this election, and to do it after a mass shooting, just a few days. Listen, Republicans, and you, Ron, would agree in your assessment, Republicans got hurt by some of their leaders' response to the attack against Nancy Pelosi's husband, not really reading the temperature in the country, and now to release this ad has a lot of people raising.
Oh yeah, have a lot of people turning around and saying, what? Yes, Herschel Walker decided that he is now pointing his aim at transgender athletes in college sports. Now, we can sit here and argue the whole time because we did cover this, that In some, especially in Texas, where they pretty much had mandated the fact that whatever gender you were born at is the gender you play with, keeping transgenders from playing on their preferred gender teams. It is amazing to me that now they want to go after college sports, but the labeling in the wording, keep in mind, the wording in the commercial that a biological male competed in a sport against me. They won't even say the word transgender. It'll be the whole thing of, well, I trained for this, and a biological male beat me in my sport. And it's amazing to me that they said biological, not transgender. Herschel Walker's dumbass was, well, I just think that it's wrong. That's it. That's all you get from him. Nothing. I'm sorry. Look, aside from him being the poster boy for CTE in life, or just the fact that all his life he was just told what to do and he did it, but the fact, like they said, the timing of it all, that again, that next week they are having a special runoff, and that Herschel Walker, as messed up as it's going to say this, somehow is still in the running to be in the U.S. Senate. And that, to me, is a scary, fracking thought. You know what else is a scary, fracking thought? Is the fact that there are a lot of people out there who think that he'll make a great candidate. The GOP backed Herschel Walker even through everything he has done, and again, this is where I point this out. The fact that Herschel Walker did all this was found to be false in almost everything that he said, and yet people voted for him. And the GOP didn't care because the GOP wants the seat. Like I said before the midterm started, I've been saying this a good year before we get to the midterms, that the GOP's main job is to do nothing more than disrupt the Senate or disrupt the House. If they can get one of them, cool. Two of them, bonus. They're not going to care. But that's how they are. Their whole rigmarole. I know it's not a word, but their whole plan of attack this year was to disrupt everything. That's it. Once they disrupt everything, cool. Mission accomplished. We can all go home. And now Walker is still somehow in the running. So Georgia, I plead with you guys. I plead with you, Georgia. You have one job. One. Keep Walker out. Because trust me, it's not the fact that he's conservative. The fact this man has literally no business in Congress as a politician. But I will say this. In the snowball's chance in hell that Walker gets elected over Warnock, nobody ever should come to me about that I'm not qualified to do something simply but because I can do it. Not that I have anything to prove it, because I literally sit there and said I could do it. Because if Herschel Walker had become U.S. Senator, then anything is possible. But we really, really, really don't want that. That's all I'm saying. We don't want it. But again, it's a scary, scary freaking thought. Some business news before we get to some other news. Some business news, like I said, guys, I don't know what it is that it seems like in this day and age that they keep saying that jobs are plentiful, but nobody is actually talking right now about the IT sector. Specifically, not only the IT sector, but jobs and logistics as well. I mean, just last week we talked about that Amazon is laying off 10,000 workers. Microsoft will be laying off 1,000 workers. Other companies like Uber and Lyft and Peloton will also be laying off workers. Elon Musk single-handedly gutted Twitter down to the point to where who knows who's still hired, who's not hired. But unfortunately, we do have some other news to add sad news to add to that as we're going into the holiday season. HP has announced that it will lay off 6,000 workers over the next couple of years. And it always seems to amaze me that when we get down to it, because they sat there and said over the next 3 years, they're going to lay off up to 6,000 workers due to lackluster quarterly earnings. As they said, the sales dropped more than 11% compared to the same period last year. So what do they usually do? Business 101. Whenever the business is actually having an issue, what do they usually do? They turn around and cut the fat, so to speak. But they always cut the fat at the lowest totem poles. And this is why I keep saying the entire time, because companies always want to promote this. oh, we're family, we're this, we're that, we stick together no matter what. And I say, and this is my favorite word I'm going to start using from now on, that's poppycock. I've always said it once, I'll say it again, guys. You are your resume. You should go where you're wanted, where job security is kept, because it's amazing. Businesses will hire you and fire you the same day. If you die on the job, the business will put your job posting out there faster than your obituary will be. And the simple fact of the matter is like you would think as they're getting ready to let people go during the holiday season, that is some truly Mr. Scrooge level stuff. But again, this goes back to what I said, that they always say the economy is failing when really it's the fact that they're trying to retain profits. Because if you'll say one thing out of these companies like Meta and Amazon and HP, as we talked about, are any of their executives fired, or it's just the people that they can get? They're just people they feel like they can cut because they're a dime a dozen, and that alone will say everything that you honestly want to know. Just saying. But yes, as it was actually said in the piece regarding Herschel Walker, there have been a couple of shootings that did happen this week, and that they must be addressed and talked about.
In Colorado over the weekend at the LGBTQ nightclub Club Q in Colorado Springs, where 5 people were killed and at least 19 others wounded. For the first time, we're hearing from the heroic Army veteran who helped stop the shooter, explaining how and why he took the gunman down, despite being unarmed himself. Well, now that suspect is in custody, and authorities are expected to formally charge him with 5 counts of first-degree murder and 5 hate crimes. ABC's Morgan Norwood is on the ground in Colorado Springs and joins us now with more. So, Morgan, this investigation, where are they going? What do we know at this point?
Yeah, let's begin with the suspect. As we know, Anderson Lee Aldrich still in the hospital with what's being described as pretty significant injuries stemming from that takedown that you mentioned at the top of the show from an Army veteran who, as those bullets were flying, pulled the suspect down by his protective vest and began pummeling him until police arrived. But as far as the work here on the ground, Terry, authorities are still, of course, combing through the scene. You see the crime scene tape behind me. You can see a little bit of the police presence here. They're combing through the suspect's background. And though this scene is pretty self-contained, they are really desperate to talk with anybody, survivors, victims, even folks who were driving by. Look, they really want to piece together this timeline and more than anything, figure out a motive in this attack. We also know that the FBI is investigating as well. Colorado State, there are hate crime charges for Aldrich, but it will be interesting to see if the federal government will lay down any federal hate crime charges. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on as well. Terry?
And Morgan, we are hearing more details from eyewitnesses, really survivors who were at Club Q when the shooting took place. Many of them say that club is like a home to them, and despite the fact that they're traumatized, they hold that place precious. Joshua Thurman, for example, one of the survivors of the shooting, and we heard from him. Take a listen to what he experienced.
As a black kid, it's taboo to be gay. So coming here, this is one of the first places that I've felt accepted to be who I am. It's supposed to be our safe space, and the community shouldn't have to go through something like this just for us to come together. It was so scary. I heard shots, broken glass, bodies. It was, how? Why?
The unseen injuries. Morgan, you've been in that community now reporting since the shooting happened. What are you hearing from survivors, victims, loved ones?
Yeah, Terry, that sound was just so gripping for the victims. It was horrific. I mean, they talked about the carnage, but they also talked about the courage as well. Listen, one man saying that as he was shot in the leg and the thigh, but all he could think about was helping others. He says that he pulled off his coat and began shielding another woman as those bullets were ringing out. So we see stories like that of resilience. But I had a little bit of time this morning to stop by the memorial, and the grief is so palpable. You can feel it in the air. But what was really striking to me, I saw, family after family laying down cards and candles and mourning those. But again, what was really striking, I saw 3 young girls. They looked like they were triplets, 3 years old, maybe 3 or 4, presumably with their mother. She was taking them by the hand and walking them down the street to that memorial and explaining to them what was going on. And those are the hard conversations that so many loved ones are having today. Behind every single face of those who were shot and those who were killed, there are family members who are dealing with immeasurable grief and immeasurable heartbreak. But for the LGBTQ community at large, we've heard from them saying that they are defiant. They are going to bounce back from this, and they are not going to be troubled with fear. They're going to stand in the face of this adversity. And so many people who we know hate is on the rise, and they're not going to be moved by that. Terry?
That is what people do together in the face of hate and of this kind of sorrow and pain that they're suffering because of this suspect. Now, this guy was investigated in 2021 for allegedly making a bomb threat against his own mother. We're told charges dropped there. Colorado does have red flag laws. How was he still able to carry the weapons into that club?
Yeah, that's a big question that so many are asking this afternoon, Terry. I want to run down a little bit of the timeline as far as that particular arrest. According to authorities, Aldrich's mother reported back in June of 2021 that her son was threatening her with some homemade bombs and explosives. Police did not find any explosives when they went out to the scene, but of course he was taken into custody and charged with kidnapping and menacing. Now, we are told that those charges were dropped, and therefore he didn't necessarily have a record for that, so it wouldn't have necessarily showed up on a background check for getting that particular rifle in which police say was used in this attack. But the big question now is, from what so many people are saying is, are the red flag laws protecting? Are they strong enough? And so those are the questions that we're getting from people here on the ground, Terry.
Lots of questions still to be.
You're not kidding. There is a lot of questions to be asked. Yes, another tragedy did happen, similar to the Pulse nightclub in Florida, that the LGBTQ nightclub Q, which happened in Colorado Springs, did have another shooter. But let's be honest. It does come back to what we have in laws. I mean, yes, Colorado does have red flag laws, but here's the problem with red flag laws. Red flag laws can be hard to enforce if law enforcement does not enforce them. For example, if you're threatening your mom with explosives, immediate detaining should happen. Because nobody just out the blue decides that, hey, I'm going to threaten my mom with the most destructive force known to mankind. At the same time, they did say nothing, don't bring a background check. Didn't I sit there and say a long time ago, and I'll keep saying it, that with background checks, they need to be more extensive. They need to be more thorough. The current standard doesn't work, which a lot of gun advocates, extreme ones and gun nuts will sit there and say, see, even with the laws, you were still able to get a gun. Yeah, legally. What they argue about is the illegal purchase of guns, not realizing that, yes, in America, in certain areas, especially my home state of Tennessee, it is fairly, almost damn near idiot proof that you can buy a firearm. And that man, despite all the issues that man has, will still get access to a firearm. Now, how he got into the club could be a number of things. We're finding out that a lot of these guys who are doing shootings are trying to find ways. They are casing security standards. They are casing where they're targeting. They're marketing. I always say it best: the most destructive threat to America is a homegrown, domestic, usually Caucasian terrorist. But you don't call them terrorists. A lot of people call them patriots, not realizing there's a thin line between nationalism and terrorism. And what they think is patriotism is really bigoted, oppressed, racist xenophobia wrapped up in an American flag. But trust me, as that story comes out, more and more details comes out about it, I guarantee they're going to find something related to him. And I would not be surprised if he has something related to a Trump or person that is a Trump favorite that he goes by. But we'll follow that story as it comes along. Our sympathies are out to those whose lives were lost at that nightclub. At the same sense, we also do extend our sympathies to to the next story that we're going to play, because again, this is why I sit there and say that we need to change the gun laws, because disgruntled people still have access to weapons that can do massive destruction in just a matter of seconds.
Breaking news out of Chesapeake, Virginia. That's where at least 6 people were killed after a mass shooting at a Walmart. A senior law enforcement official tells NBC News the shooter was an employee there, a disgruntled employee. Police would only confirm that he was an employee and that he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So far, his name has not been released, but investigators say they've executed a search warrant at his home. The Chesapeake police chief says officers were on the scene just minutes after the initial 911 call.
Our 911 dispatch center received the first call at 10:12 p.m. last night. The first officers arrived on scene within 2 minutes at 10:14 and entered the store approximately 2 minutes later at 10:16. The first responding officers entered the store and the scene was declared safe by 11:20 p.m.
So to recap, 6 people killed. The gunman also confirmed dead. 4 victims are currently being treated at area hospitals, but their conditions have not been released. Right now, investigators say there is no clear motive for the attack, but they'll spend several days processing the scene while their investigation is ongoing.
So yeah, like I said, guys, you're not surprised. It's not surprised as far as
administration is one
thought. So it's not surprising, guys, that for simple fact of the matter, that literally
again extending a pause on federal student loan payments. This comes as President.
Thank you. Sorry about that. That was interesting. But yeah, the whole idea of just people getting access to these things. Yes, it should be alarming. Yes, we should be concerned. Yes, that we should be asking more questions. But I guarantee, as details come out, and I'm being completely honest, as the more details come out about this, the more people are going to be sitting there saying, but why did it exactly? Keyword in that phrase. Why did it happen? Because not to go too deep into this, we do have to find, I mean, if this is not a study into mental health and guns, which again, the CDC still hasn't got its funding for that it's trying to do, because that was the one thing that the NRA was, along with other ones, but the NRA was the most powerful group at the time, was not wanting. They did not want a mental study to be done between guns and mental health. I wonder why. Surely a disgruntled employee, or surely someone who was probably shunned by either shunned or just turned away, or just literally just had a xenophobia, literally had a phobia against anybody different than them that was so extreme that they felt the need to eradicate them all. Those people still have access to firearms. And we're still asking ourselves, why? Why has anything changed? I'm asking you, gun nuts, because usually whenever laws get put into place, you're the first one screaming, laws, criminals don't follow laws, or look at Chicago, or all the above. That's all you guys do, but you don't offer any solutions. Oh, except put guns in the hands of everybody, because, at least everybody's got a fighting chance. The whole bad guy gets stopped by a good guy with a gun is BS. But we'll follow the stories as it comes along, but I guarantee somewhere along those lines, it'll always come back to that, and I wouldn't be surprised if they found a manifesto. But speaking of things in jail, however, we did cover that story last week about an inmate who was literally beaten. I mean, he got the beating of a lifetime by several sheriffs at a county jail. Well, we do have an update for that.
3 correctional officers now sit in a Camden County jail cell. Tuesday, Mason Garrick, Ryan Beagle, and Braxton Massey were arrested after an investigation into this viral video of an inmate being beaten.
There's a sacred and fragile trust that exists between law enforcement and the communities that we serve. This trust must be protected and preserved.
The 3 men were arrested for battery and violating their oath of office. While they're facing felony charges, 2 other correctional officers who were involved will face undisclosed disciplinary actions.
Unfortunately, some discredit the profession, the badge, and the oath they swore to uphold.
Jared Hobbs was beaten on the same day he was booked, September 3rd, but it took 10 weeks before an internal investigation happened. To Timothy Bessett Sr., president of the NAACP Camden County chapter,
I think our community won't be satisfied until these officers are held to the full extent of the law.
Trust in the local law enforcement is tarnished.
We believe that the sheriff action was a delayed action.
We wasn't shocked that a charge, in fact, came today.
Harry Daniels, who's representing Hobbs as his attorney, says the arrests are only the beginning. Justice, he says, is seeing the correctional officers who beat Hobbs convicted and then restore the fragile trust between the people and law enforcement.
A message need to be sent, because if a message is not sent to those bad actors, then guess what? We will be sitting here having the same conversation again.
In Camden County, Tristan Hardy.
Ooh, not bad actors. Not bad actors. No. Okay. First and foremost, I am glad that 3 out of the 7 officers you see in that video, we know 3 of them are sitting in county jail right now, charged with battery and violating the oath of office. What happened to the other 4? Because that's my thing. It's great. Do not get me wrong. It's great to see 3 out of the 7 we're told they're in jail. The other ones will have undisclosed, how can I put this over so nicely? They will have undisclosed punishments? Really? It took 7 guys to beat 1 guy down who was already in jail and unarmed, and only 3 people are sitting in jail? 4 people are possibly going to see some sort of reprimand? And keep in mind what they said in the video. 10 weeks. This isn't new. 10 weeks meant that almost 2.5 months went by before this came to light. So imagine for 2 weeks, almost 2.5 months, that no one knows what happens to you. But until someone finally does, then it's like, so for 2.5 months, these guys are still able to protect and serve as sheriffs in this county jail with no issue. But what kills me is the officer says, well, a few bad actors. I hate that term, because that is so downplaying a big issue when it comes to law enforcement, especially with people of color. It's a big issue. Well, there's a few bad actors. Chris Rock had a brilliant joke to this, that you can't say that all cops are bad. There's just a few bad apples out the bunch. Really? Because my thing is, a few bad apples would spoil the bunch. But also, you treat them like airline pilots. Sure, most of them are good, but few of them crash and burn every now and then. In that position of law enforcement, you cannot have those who just simply get by. You can't. It doesn't work that way. So, yes, do I hope that all 7 of them see some jail time? Absolutely. And I would like to see them get beat down. Technically, that's the extreme justice side of me, but I still want to see justice served. But I also want to see those who are in charge of them also see their day in court as well. Because it's not just them. It's those that were empowered by them to do what they did. And for 2.5 weeks, those powers that be decided to do nothing until it became viral. So yes, not just those officers that beat down that poor man, it's also those that were over them that also need to be reprimanded as well. But we do got a couple more stories, guys, before we get to our business story in our Feel Good segment. Imagine the 1950s and 60s. This is a history lesson. But in the 1950s and 60s, in a certain location, imagine that you were told that you had to move. Imagine that you were told that you had to leave everything that you know, everything that you cared for on land that you thought you had, that you owned, and you were told to leave. Well, that definitely did happen in the 1950s and 60s, and not just to Black people, but also Mexicans as well. Like I said, this is the reason why we need to be relevant, why history needs to be relevant, and why it needs to be taught properly.
Families are seeking millions of dollars from the city of Palm Springs after being forced out of their homes in the 50s and 60s. It happened in a neighborhood known as Section 14. Many homes reportedly were burned and bulldozed before eviction notices were even issued. Pearl Devers says she still remembers the day she had to leave her home, her neighborhood, and her father. I spoke with her yesterday along with her civil rights attorney, Ariva Martin. Pearl, can you tell me a little bit about your story, what happened to your family, and why you and others are taking legal action now?
Yes, Palm Springs was a safe place for us. The place where we grew up, it was a wonderful community surrounded by loving families who cared for one another. It didn't matter if they were Black or Mexican. We all got along, and even to this day, still lifelong friends. And so it was great living in Section 14. It was, we felt loved and protected. And one day I looked up and it seemed like out of nowhere, my life changed when my mom and my two brothers had to leave our home. We left my home, and not only did we leave my home, we left my dad behind. My dad was going to stick it out. Later, I found out that the reason why we had to leave was because we were being forced out of our home. But the hard part for me was leaving my father behind. That was the day that my family was split, literally torn apart.
Now, Ariva, you're representing a number of these families. The city council formally apologized. So what explanation have you received for why this happened to begin with? And what's the reaction been to the request for monetary restitution?
Well, thanks, Diane, for covering this really important story. I just want to make it clear a couple of points. We have done a preliminary harm assessment, and like when there's any natural disaster, a storm, a hurricane, an earthquake, experts go in immediately and they try to assess the harm. And that's what we've done in this case. And we've used noted economist Dr. Julianne Malvo to do that preliminary assessment. And that assessment says that the harm done to these families, economic harm alone, ranges between $400 million to upward to $2 billion. Now, we haven't requested this amount from the city. What we have said to the city is that we want to negotiate. We want to engage in a process by which we come up with a plan, a restitution plan that makes these families whole. And the city has apologized. It has recognized that as the Attorney General's report from 1965 so clearly lays out that these families were targeted, that this was racially motivated, that the city's actions were inexcusable. And in this Attorney General's report, the language used by the then Attorney General is that this was a city-engineered Holocaust because the city used its own fire department and its agents to actually burn these families out of their homes. You also, Diane, used the word eviction. There's absolutely no evidence that the city went through the legal process of evictions. As a lawyer, there's a very formal process that happens when you are evicting someone from their property, and there's no evidence that that was utilized. What we do know from oral histories from these families is that fear, intimidation was used, that the city and its officials intimidated these families and forcibly removed them using bulldozers, using actual fires that were set of their homes, oftentimes with their personal belongings still in the home. So I am representing their survivors, the descendants. There are hundreds of them, upwards to 500 or more, and just seeking restorative justice, seeking that the city moves past the apology and actually takes some actions to make these families whole.
Now, Pearl, in addition to that formal apology, the city also removed the statue of the mayor who was in place during much of that time. What did that acknowledgement mean to you and your family?
It means that someone noticed a harm that was done to a community. And not only did they notice, they acknowledged and they took action. And we do feel justified in that one act.
So, Pearl, how do you want to see this play out?
I would like for the city to, we're seeking justification. I'd like for, there are many families who have stories that haven't been told. I would like to see memorials. I would like to see restorative justice done for myself and the Section 14 survivors and descendants.
All right, so many stories left untold. Pearl Devers.
Now think about that for a second. That the simple fact of the matter is that the city the city decided that these families in this certain section, city of Palm Springs, decided that these certain groups of people had to move. So yeah, if I was the descendants of those families that live in that neighborhood, or just the living descendants that are still there, you doggone right, cut the check, because there is no other answer. There is no other answer for what happened to them. There really isn't. You can't call it eminent domain. You can't call it that they were compensated for their loss. They were told to move, forcibly removed. I mean, imagine coming home and your home's in shambles before the eviction notice you can even see it. And that alone, from a history standpoint, says a lot. This is why I sit there and say, you know what, maybe CRT wouldn't have been such a bad thing to teach the kids, to teach cultural sensitivity and awareness. Maybe it wouldn't be such a bad thing, because we wouldn't be decades later trying to resolve the issues of those that caused this mess because they could. So yes, I hope Section 14, or the group that they're called themselves by, do get restitutions. And to the city of Palm Springs, California, yeah, cut the check. Simple and plain. Restitution for loss of income, stress, and everything else. Cut the mother check. I have no issue in saying that. But as I said before, it's amazing to me that the American dream itself of owning a home, just seems to just get less and less. Because I keep pointing this out, when you, especially in the world of owning a home, buying a home, mortgage, things of that nature, you have these hedge fund corporations out there with money to burn that are buying up these properties, bulldozing homes, and building apartments. I've said it before and I'll say it again. What's more lucrative, a renter or a homeowner? A renter, no matter what, means that you will always get monetary income coming in there, versus homeowners, to where a certain extent you will get the same thing and probably more, but eventually that's going to end, because eventually those homeowners will pay off their mortgage and own their own home. So what's the long-term game? Renters. But for those, especially like myself, who are just wanting a home wanting a home, a backyard, nice place for the kids, things of that nature, it is amazing to me that these landlords out here are starting to use these automation processes. And these automation processes are not good. Even more so, there's a woman out there right now that experienced that same thing that I'm talking about these companies playing landlord, and the fact that they are getting more robotic of the day of how they handle with people.
Is a single mom who cares for Alzheimer's patients at a nursing home. Recently, she had reason to worry she'd be out of her home and out on the street.
Your rent went up.
Rent went up.
And you had no idea?
Had no idea.
How'd you find out?
I got an eviction notice.
Alan says her landlord, Vinebrook Homes, raised her rent and charged a new fee without her knowledge. She then struggled to communicate with the company through an automated online portal. Then came the order to get out.
How stunning was it to see that eviction notice?
It was very, very stunning. It actually just crushed, because I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on?
Vinebrook owns more than 24,000 single-family homes in mostly lower-income areas across 18 states. It's among the largest corporate landlords in the U.S. and owns more than 6,000 homes in Southwest Ohio alone.
Here in the Cincinnati area, real estate is particularly attractive to corporate investors because of low prices and laws that favor landlords.
Vinebrook is one of the growing number of institutional investors buying up single-family homes that they then turn into rentals.
How many homes does Vinebrook own in this neighborhood?
220.
220?
Yes.
Just in this one neighborhood?
Yes.
Laura Brunner runs the Port of Greater Cincinnati Development Authority and says Vinebrook has raised rents, been quick to evict, and slow to repair homes.
It's actually brilliant. You know, they found a really, really good way to make a lot of money.
Is it right?
I don't think it's right. I think it's predatory.
In July of 2021, the city of Cincinnati sued Vinebrook to recover more than $600,000 in unpaid water bills and fines. Vinebrook would not comment on the record about the suit, but settled it a month later, paying almost all what the city said was owed.
How crushing is this for lower-income residents?
It's huge.
Jordan Kotler is a staff attorney with the Legal Aid Society of Greater Cincinnati, which has about 25 open cases against Vinebrook.
The model of automating the property management system doesn't work.
Vinebrook declined to answer specific questions about renter disputes, but the company provided a written statement about its mission to provide safe, functional, and clean rental homes that are affordable to a range of budgets. Vinebrook pointed out that 4 out of 5 of its residents renew their leases each year.
I feel like an elephant is on top of my chest.
This June, Janika Allen reached a settlement with Vinebrook to rescind both the rent increase and the eviction notice. But the next month, even though she was sending in her rent, she was threatened with eviction again.
I believe this company has got away with a lot because people don't want to share their story.
After NBC News contacted Vinebrook, her case was quickly resolved. But at this Cincinnati courthouse, 20 other tenants are still fighting against their corporate landlord. Gabe Gutierrez, NBC News.
That's crazy, isn't it? Look, I'll be the first one to say it. Automation is never a good idea. It's not. It's never has been. Because automation leads to the fact that, especially in the world of owning a home or renting a home, that's priority. We all need a place to lay our heads at night, a place to protect ourselves from the elements, a place that we can, feel comfortable in and host parties or birthdays, however, what have you. But when you have companies like them using automation, this is where the problem lies. Because automation in itself is a wonderful idea, but the problem with automation is that it's illogical. And again, those types of systems can make major mistakes. And because they are fast-forwarding eviction processes, people like said woman that we just saw the story on was simply put asking why the rent increase. Number one, why the rent increase? And when she was making payments, why am I getting the eviction notices? Again, this is why I say it's the problem. That here's an idea for conservatives out there, which I know you're never going to do. That to me would be a great example of you guys doing something different than complaining, actually having a plan to combat housing in America, to combat mortgage prices, to combat rentals, to combat predatory lending, redlining, things of that nature. Conservatives could do that, or they can be silent. Silent as much as they are on certain things, especially with one Brett Favre. Keep in mind, Brett Favre, who's probably still ducking under a hole right now just because of his involvement with Missouri and a certain college facility that was built using welfare funding. Yeah, Brett Favre again has appeared. And before I play this, I just find this amazing that Brett Favre was literally caught red-handed influencing Missouri government. At the same time, nothing has happened to him. Nobody's talking about it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to defend Kyrie Irving or Kanye West. Both of those guys are freaking idiots, in my opinion. And the simple fact of the matter is, you are facing the consequences of your free speech. So, just to get that out there, not defending them. But it's amazing how little Brett Favre is being talked about, especially when you see about the kind of thing he's pushing for now.
Are going to happen. Football great Brett Favre appearing with other athletes and the head of a drug company in 2018, promoting a new treatment for concussions. Hopefully, Prevacus is that treatment that gets into mainstream in the next few years. And suggesting it reduces the swelling of the brain. If it can ever get approved and used, I think it'll greatly help long-term health. Favre was the drug company's biggest outside investor and used his clout to urge Mississippi's then Governor Phil Bryant to spend millions of taxpayer dollars to test the unproven drug. Favre wrote, "It's third and long, and we need you to make it happen." "I will open a hole," Bryant responded, indicating he would assist. A few weeks later, the company, Prevacus, received its first installment of what would be more than $2 million from an unlikely source, according to court records, the state welfare agency, federal taxpayer dollars intended to lift kids out of poverty, ending up at a Florida-based drug company. Mississippi State Auditor Shad White tracked the funds.
Even if the concussion treatment had been a viable, real treatment for concussions, you still can't spend welfare money intended to benefit the poor on a company like this.
4 years later, the millions in taxpayer dollars are gone. There's still no evidence the drug works in humans, and it's nowhere close to getting approval. But Favre has continued to promote the drug on Twitter and podcasts, in August describing his role.
My involvement basically was bring awareness, generate some enthusiasm, maybe funding.
This past year, Prevacus entered a joint venture with Odyssey, a healthcare company in Nevada. Wall Street analyst David Maris says that joint venture is on shaky financial ground.
To me, the financials say, look, this is a troubled company. On top of that, they have less than a year's worth of cash. So if you don't have enough cash to pay your bills for this year, how are you going to get a drug to the market?
Based on what you know now, would you invest your own money in this drug?
No. In fact, you're better off buying a lottery ticket.
The state of Mississippi is now suing Prevacus and its CEO as part of a broader civil action against Favre and others to recover misused welfare funds. Favre and the Prevacus CEO deny wrongdoing and say they didn't know the $2 million came from welfare. Earlier this month, Favre released a new message to fans regarding the recent allegations.
Trust me, the truth will come out in time.
5 people have pleaded guilty in the broader welfare fraud scandal, including 2 key figures involved in handing out the money who have agreed to cooperate in an ongoing FBI investigation. There still is no indication Favre will face charges.
So I find it interesting. Nobody's talking about it. And again, I'm not trying to defend Kyrie. I'm not trying to defend Kanye. Again, they're both idiots. They're both idiots. There's no way I can say that. Kanye and Kyrie are both idiots. But Brett Favre, now pushing forward with a new pharmaceutical drug and is trying to get government oversight on it, it is amazing to me how little it's being talked about. When he should be, he gave a statement about his investigation because you know why? Because the right people have told Favre, smile. They always say less, smile more. And that's what he's done. Kept his head in the ground and sat there and said, no, I didn't do this. I didn't tell them to do that. But you kind of did. And now you're asking the government to do it again. But again, I find it interesting. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's questioning it. And yet, it's dead silence. That's all I can say. Completely dead silence. But we'll see. Like I said before, it's amazing that, with everybody doing things, talking about, bashing other diverse groups, a man literally robs a state blind or influences a state to build something simply because his daughter goes there and is now pushing a new pharmaceutical drug and is asking for government oversight. Again, how in the blue is that possible? That's all I'm saying. But move right along, guys. Our last story before we get to our feel good segment. I know with this being the day of tomorrow will be the day of the turkey. So if you are celebrating Thanksgiving, hopefully you'll be with your loved ones. If you're celebrating Friendsgiving, definitely go ahead and do that. If you're celebrating Festivus for the rest of us, go for it. Hopefully you can be at a table with people that you love and you care about and enjoy it. Because unfortunately, after Thanksgiving comes Black Friday and the crazy financially strapping holiday season, which could be affected, however, reason being for a problem that we thought left in the dust, but much like most bad B-rated movies, they seem to rear their ugly heads again. I am talking about a potential strike between the rail yards that could impact the U.S. economy. Keep in mind, we did talk about this a couple months ago, to where literally and figuratively, one of the biggest rail unions, which they thought the deal was done, turns out that they rejected the deal over concerns over demanding schedules and the lack of paid sick times, which again, this raised the risk of a strike, which again, could happen as soon as December 9th. Keep in mind, guys, everybody out there was literally and figuratively talking about, oh, this can go horribly bad. Oh, if the train yards stop or if the unions go on strike, it holds back everything. We're right back in that same position that we thought we were done with. The point that I'm making out of all this, guys, is just that, yes, your holiday season, along with everything else, can be affected because people do not realize that these train yard labor unions and the people that run these things really do run logistics and shipping in America. Yes, your UPS, your FedEx, your DHLs, your multiple logistics companies out there. However, when it comes to the harbors, the train yards, and those in the east or west coast and north and south, they do carry a lot of what the comings and goings in this great country. And if those guys were to go on strike, it could be anywhere up to almost $2 to $2.5 billion lost a day. So goes back to what I said. Unions do work, and if you don't pay these people, they go on strike. So yes, the same thing that happened last time, a few months ago, can happen now. Smaller inventory and stock, smaller stocks and inventory in stores. Prices go up on almost everything again. People panic and buy in droves. It's happened once. It could happen again. However, it's amazing that these so-called companies can literally solve the problems. And I'll say it once, I'll say it again. It is amazing how quickly our problems in America can simply be solved when all you have to do is pay people. Pay people a living wage. Give them the paid sick time. Give them paid maternity or paternity leave. Adequate health care to where you're not paying more than the actual company is. It's not that hard, people. But companies don't want to do that because they care about profit. They'll risk profit until profit. I mean, it's just like Amazon. Amazon has built themselves up to such a level to where they will sit there and have massive employee turnover rate as long as the profit's good. But until that day happens where profit isn't good, where things will finally change. But we'll follow that story as it comes along. Because like I said, with Turkey Day being passed and the fact that they could strike on December 9th, which honestly is not too far off from Christmas, because you got to think those 3 weeks before the 25th are crucial days for most companies to get their shipping in to customers who are actually ordering the stuff via the internet or via sales portal. Those 2.5 weeks after Christmas. Well, actually, I'm sorry, that's wrong. Those 2.5 weeks after Thanksgiving. So this week, next week, those 2.5 weeks is critical. And if those yard labor unions are still on strike, Christmas might get a little delayed this year. Just saying. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and move on to our feel good segment. Usually, how the Frack guy here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes we use faith and humanity. But hey, it's Wednesday, it's Hump Day. Tomorrow being Friday Eve, which is Thursday, and of course Thanksgiving Day. We will leave you guys out with some good vibes. And I think I found one where I have found a kid who has realized, you know what? If I want an Xbox, I'm gonna get a job like my mom's been telling me. And it's a funny story, but yet, like I said before, it's funny. And right now, we could all use a good laugh.
He decided that he was going to try to apply to make sure he got his Xbox. He got online and he applied for a job. And I mean, just in complete honesty, I was just like, okay, all right, whatever, Nash.
At the very bottom of the application, he put that he was 8 years old. And when the kitchen manager saw the application, she just assumed that he forgot to put the 1 in front of the 8. I said, we got to do something for this young man. He's obviously very special.
I guess as a kid, he's never had this emotion before, but he was like, I'm just so shocked and I'm so happy. I don't know why. I want to cry though, Mom. And I'm like, sweetheart, that's a normal reaction.
You know, say what you want. That kid was determined. That kid was utterly determined to be like, you know what? I'm going to get an Xbox. And, you know, I guarantee his mom was probably like, oh, well, you're going to get a job, honey. You know what he said? Cool. I'm going to go apply to be a dishwasher. And I can only imagine, aside from child labor laws keeping him from actually working there, but it was cool to see the restaurant manager say, you know, we got to do something for this kid because, you know, you can't knock that kind of drive. That if I want something, I'm gonna go out there and earn it. But still, just thought it was pretty cool that, you know, an 8-year-old got an Xbox, you know, because he wanted to go for it. I myself will be going to the nearest Dodge dealership and apply because I want a TRX. Wish me luck. That being said, guys, that's going to do it for this podcast. I do thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate it. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here. I do want to shout out to my buddy Vaughn at Big BZ on all socials. Definitely check him out, especially on his TikToks and back on his beats. So definitely give him a like and see and follow. Also, myself, guys, you can find me on all socials, BlackFox447. Like and follow me everywhere. I usually post everything that I watch, read, and play, and also some gym stuff. Got to do a couple push-ups. The link at the bottom, give me a second to make that just a wee bit bigger. If you copy and paste that link in your browser, it'll take you to our link tree that has the YouTube, Facebook groups for all of our podcasts. How the Frack got here, Get Bit, and of course, the Offense Podcast. Definitely like, share, and follow. Let me know what you think. If you like the show or didn't like the show, I still want to know. I'm just that curious of a guy. Aside from that, guys, like I said, it is Thanksgiving. Tomorrow is going to be Thanksgiving. Please, oh please, if you are spending it with your loved ones, be safe wherever you're going. Be protective because again, we still have RSV, Corona, and a lot of flu getting passed out. Because right now, I do not want to be anybody in an airport. But if you are flying or if you're traveling, you're going by car, please protect yourselves. Please wear a mask going through high traffic areas. Protect yourself. That's how you protect others to keep the numbers down. And of course, be safe to wherever you're going. Also, like I said before, also shout out to the former Green Ranger, Jason David Frank, who reminds us that again, guys, you not only check on your friends, but check on your strong people. Check on the people that you care about and love. Let them see how makes you doing all right, because again, you don't know what they're going through. You check it on them, let them know that you're how to be cool, you all right, you straight. Checking on them can do a lot more than just brighten up their day. You can actually save life in the process. And trust me, and also with that being said, you are never alone. That's all I'm saying. But rest in peace, Jason David Frank. One of the main things I grew up with was Power Rangers. So that being said, guys, we're definitely going to cut it off here. I lost my train of thought for a second. You can already tell I need to look forward to Turkey Day and the itis hasn't even set in. So last thing I say about How the Frack here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better society as we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then. Like electing our first black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first black woman for the Board of Governors, electing our first black four-star military general, all great ththings. When we don't learn from history, guys, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why I keep saying, why do you keep asking yourselves, why does everything go up on your paycheck? Why do we elect something different? Why do we elect the different politicians but still the same old game in Congress every year? And most importantly, how the Frack got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll all get through this. Happy Thanksgiving or Turkey Day, or the fact of celebrating the fact that the Indigenous State of America